Hare Krishna. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharya Nirvisesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshakarya. Hare Krishna, everyone.
Hare Krishna.
How many of you have heard of Yamuna Devi? Wonderful. How many of you have heard her? I think everyone from the Govindam prayers that we hear greeting the deities. So last year, I was fortunate to read 2 books that were written on her life. And the special thing about these books is they were written by V.A.N.I.T.A Devi. And she had lived and served with Yamuna Devi for 37 years. So she would know her more than anyone. So we have an inside view. And also what's extremely special is we have a lot of Yamuna Devi's own words. So we can hear and see through her eyes. Can you hear okay? Yeah, it seems a bit of an echo, but is that just, it's okay? Okay. So, okay, yeah. So I wanted to share what inspired me when I was reading about Yamuna Devi. So the first thing, which was very appropriate to hear who we are, she was one of the first female disciples of Srila Prabhupada. And she received so much personal association and training from Srila Prabhupada. And she was involved in such early historical parts of ISKCON. So she was part of ISKCON's history. When you read about her, you understand that she was very capable and competent. And Srila Prabhupada really trusted her and relied on her. She also had a very active and alive relationship with Srila Prabhupada as his disciple. She was always trying to go deeper in capturing his instructions and applying them, not just superficial surface understanding, and we all need to do that. V.A.N.I.T.A said, to Yamuna, it seemed like she left nearly every encounter with Srila Prabhupada with new and profound instructions in her spiritual life. Also, I found inspiring how she dealt with challenges. There were a lot of growing pains in the early days of ISKCON. It was not easy for her many times. Yet, she saw every situation, an event or exchange, in a very personal way to enhance a lesson that she needed to learn. Always trying to apply things. When there would be a challenge, she would be asking, what does Srila Prabhupada want me to learn from this? What is Krishna trying to teach me from this situation? Also, while reading about Yamuna Devi, I found a running theme. And the theme was Srila Prabhupada actively training this dear disciple. Constant training, teaching, guiding. And sometimes his training he was hard as a thunderbolt, sometimes as soft as a rose. And he was an expert teacher, so he knew when to apply which. And he also knew how much to apply to who could take it and who couldn't. And he was also training her for her future spiritual life, not just the immediate present. V.A.N.I.T.A says that Yamuna used to say, Srila Prabhupada treated devotees differently according to their surrender and commitment. He was very strict with some, chastising them for minor infringements. And Yamuna herself experienced this. And others would have a long leash when their behavior or commitment was maybe lacking, but their sincerity was very real and deep. The last thing about his Srila Prabhupada as a teacher, as a guru, was in addition to the training and discipline, because disciple means discipline, he also gave such personal love and care and kindness, which you'll see. So he could perfectly combine the discipline with the love, which is beautiful. So let's now hear Yamuna's story. And I am a little nervous because I have a lot of beautiful material and I can't share everything due to time. So I'm hoping that you're all patient and it's not too much to take in. So it's interesting to see in the beginning of Yamuna Devi's life how Krishna prepared her for her spiritual journey. Her family, she was born into a Catholic tradition, so there were devout elder women in her family. She was surrounded by that, spiritual ladies. At an early age, she wanted to be a nun. She took it that seriously. Her mother taught her domestic skills, where she imbibed neatness, cleanliness, cooking, love of order, and she used all of this for serving Srila Prabhupada. Also with her friends, Krishna arranged everything. She met a boy, there was a boy named Sam, sitting right behind her in 7th grade. And they became friends. And their first encounter was he put her braids in his ink. So then when she moved, ink went everywhere. Later, she met the same boy in another city in college. Sam was there. And he had a friend that she met named Mike. Later on, you'll see, Sam became Shamasundar from 7th grade, and Mike married her sister. And Mike became Mukunda and married Janaki, her sister. So they had such a long-standing friendship which they could use for service for Prabhupada. Yamuna would say, looking back in retrospect at all of these coincidences in her life, she so clearly saw the loving hand of the Lord gently guiding her closer to him. And that always brought tears of gratitude and increased her faith and conviction. Another thing that prepared her for her life of service was her vocation. she decided to study calligraphy when she was young. And one of the best people that did calligraphy in the country lived in the same city where she was studying. So she learned from the best, and Srila Prabhupada immediately engaged her with her calligraphy. She would make invitations, membership certificates to ISKCON, life membership forms, posters, and sometimes letters. So Krishna prepared her for that. So how did her journey to Krishna in this life start? Her sister moved with her partner Mike to New York City and wrote her about meeting this bona fide Swami from India and how she became his very first disciple, female disciple. She was in the first initiation, Janaki, her sister. And she basically then wrote very soon after saying, I'm getting married, please, please come to my wedding. It will be performed by the bona fide Swami, and there will be a fire sacrifice. And Yamuna is thinking, good Lord, what is a fire sacrifice? No idea. So she goes to New York City for her sister's wedding. She meets Swamiji and goes to his apartment, lunchtime. He's the one serving lunch to everyone, Srila Prabhupada. And she's introduced to him. At the time, she was following a very strict macrobiotic diet. So it was extremely strict. And so she was overwhelmed by all of the lunch preparations. Mostly ingredients that she didn't eat. The chilies made her throat burn. The flavors were very assertive, not hinted, not subtle. And she decided then and there, this would be the last time she would eat here. Then when she bit into an explosion of sugar, a gulab jamun, that convinced her even more. And little did she know what was ahead. Then Srila Prabhupada asked her, when are the other members of the family coming for the wedding? And she said, only me. He said, this is most unusual, most unusual. As the only member of the bride's family, he asks her to come the next day to help with cooking the feast. And this is her first seva with Prabhupada. Remember, 2 days ago, she had never met him off the street, you could say. So these are her words. Okay, well first she arrived at Swamiji's apartment at 9 o'clock. He gave her a shopping list. She came back, got everything except for hold. She didn't know what hold was. And then then she figured out it was turmeric, haldi. So she didn't understand. So on returning from the shopping, he asked me to wash my hands and sat me on the floor of the front room with a 5-pound bag of flour, some butter, and water. He said, can you make a medium-hard dough? I replied, do you mean a pastry or pie crust dough? Or a short crust or phyllo pastry dough? What kind of dough do you want? And he said, how old are you? I'm 25. With a look of surprise, he said, you were 25 and you can't make a medium hard dough? In India, any young girl from the age of 5 can make. Never mind, I will show you. So he emptied the contents of the bag of flour, broke up the butter with his fingers, and then he made a well in the center, poured just the amount of water, and very quickly he had an expert medium hard dough. He then brought potatoes that were mashed and began to sprinkle spices. Swamiji, what are these spices? He explained using the Hindi terms, which I didn't understand, but I didn't want to appear more incompetent than I already felt, so I said nothing. I soon found out that my cooking duty for the entire day was to make something called aloo kachori. Swamiji showed me how to shape and stuff the kachoris. And from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m., I sat making this one preparation. During that time, Swamiji routinely and effortlessly swept into the room with about 13 cooked preparations for at least 100 people that he single-handedly made. Throughout the course of the day, Swamiji instructed me on some of the fundamental aspects of Krishna conscious philosophy. It was excruciatingly hot. So I asked, Swamiji, may I please have a glass of water? He peeked around the kitchen door and then said, go wash your hands. Although baffled, I immediately did so. When I came back into the hallway, he was waiting with a glass of water. He then explained, while preparing this special food meant to be offered to the Supreme Lord, one does not think of eating or drinking for oneself. So after drinking, I washed my hands and sat down for my kachori task. At about 2 p.m., I asked, Swamiji, may I go have a cigarette? He peeked around the door again and said, go wash your hands. When she came back, he explained the 4 regulative principles of Krishna consciousness, including no intoxication. I continued to make the kachoris, all while marveling as Swamiji paraded preparation after preparation by me and lined them up. He saw me wipe my arm and hand across my forehead at one point. He looked down and said the now familiar words, go wash your hands. Again, I did so, and he handed me a paper towel. And then he patiently explained that cooking for the Supreme Lord has standards of cleanliness and purity. So while cooking, one should not touch the body or clothing. So in this way, Swamiji, using the medium of cooking, gave me my first fundamental instructions in Krishna consciousness. Dinatarini says, Yamuna recalled watching the wedding ceremony through eyes fogged with exhaustion and sensory overload. Janaki later remembered that Srila Prabhupada personally put flowers in her hair, and he tore off a piece of his own dhoti, wrapped it like a shawl on Mukunda, and then after the ceremony tied it to her sari, saying they now had to remain together. Yamuna says, after the festivities, when I approached Swamiji to thank him, he asked how long I would stay in New York and requested that I come to the morning and evening kirtans and classes. He said, if you chant Hare Krishna every morning and evening and follow the rules and regulations, you will advance quickly in Krishna consciousness. I was anxious to come, spellbound by his presence, and I felt he was sincerely concerned for my spiritual well-being. So Yamuna left for San Francisco with Mukunda and Janaki, and on their way they convinced their old friend Sam and his partner, who became Shyamasundar and Mataji, they convinced them to join them and start the second ever ISKCON temple in San Francisco. It was a small family-type temple atmosphere. And again, like in New York, it was a simple storefront, and Srila Prabhupada lived in a nearby apartment. And he soon visited San Francisco. In the mornings, our program began at 7 a.m. and Prabhupada would chant the Guru Vastakam. You could look around and see people crying from listening to this great soul. He sang with such a depth of feeling that you couldn't take your eyes off him. And you couldn't help feel touched by his sincerity. Swamiji began training us in cooking during the spring. His expertise in the kitchen always was a source of wonder to me, says he. He would cook so quickly while keeping 4 or 5 chapatis on the tawa at a time. And from beginning in 1966 to 1977, he was still emphasizing, you simply make what Krishna likes, not what you like. I remember entering Swamiji's room one day, and he immediately asked, when are you going to become initiated? I replied that I was still uncertain, but it was possible I was going to take a trip to India and Tibet because I respected high mountains and elevated spiritual consciousness. I wanted to go to the highest place. Srila Prabhupada replied, I can take you to a higher place than Tibet. Just see, just see. And when he said those words, I began to completely understand. I have to see through his eyes what is the highest place. In retrospect, whenever Yamuna looked back at those years, at her initial reluctance to commit to initiation, she would become often emotional when recalling Srila Prabhupada's patience, tolerance, and limitless compassion. One more incident from San Francisco, this time in San Francisco. This was just sweet. Janaki had a black cat named Skutzelblunzer, who traveled from New York to San Francisco. And the cat would take any opportunity to escape from Janaki's apartment and creep down the hallway to Swamiji's apartment. And he would often run underneath the bathtub in Swamiji's bathroom. And every time Swamiji entered the bathroom and saw the cat there, he would patiently ask for it to be taken out. But somehow the cat always found its way back under the bathtub. Swamiji knew that Skutzelblunzer was under the bathtub. We all knew, but we thought, isn't it cute that he likes to be around Swamiji? So when Swamiji bathed with the lota, he would purposefully splash water all around the floor, knowing that Skutzelblunzer would get wet. And the cat acted like it was the most terrible thing to have his paw wet. And finally, after Swamiji would finish bathing, someone would go retrieve him. And he would find his way then back under the bathtub. And this happened regularly. Once during visiting hours, Swamiji was sitting on his rocking chair with many devotees gathered, And Skotsobranzer came closer and closer and reached Swamiji's feet and simply sat down, looking at Swamiji and saying, meow. Swamiji picked up his beautiful lotus foot and began to gently stroke the back of the cat with his foot, saying, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. And then he asked Janaki, are you feeding him Krishna Prasadam milk? So he was even encouraging the animals to hear the chanting and to take prasadam. These activities, Yamuna says, all of this is Yamuna's words, these activities touched our hearts and made us long for further association with such a personality who was even concerned for the spiritual well-being of a cat. They had an enormous impact, making my attachment and commitment become more deeply rooted in my heart by seeing Prabhupada interact like this. My first exchange with Swamiji in service in San Francisco happened through my calligraphy. I had calligraphed the Shikshastakam prayers and presented them as a gift. Prabhupada's eyes opened widely, and he commented that the Goswamis were very expert in beautiful handwriting, and that I should use this in Krishna's service. He asked me to make a sign for the San Francisco temple to hang outside the door. I brought him samples of 25 or 30 different styles of scripts, and he would look up and say, oh, you can do all of this? Yes, I can do. And he picked out the script that was to be used for the sign. Whatever ability or interest we had, he would encourage us to use it in Krishna's service. He found ways. When Prabhupada got sick and he went to India, he wrote in a letter to Janaki, a PS, and he wrote in here, you will be angry if I say that your sister is better than you. But I think I am right, because Mukunda supports me. Rivalry between good hearts is a very nice job. But I'm equally pleased with both you and your sister. So he was very sweet, very sweet. So Prabhupada, like I mentioned, he left San Francisco for New York, back to New York. He got quite sick. He had a stroke. So then he went to India to recover. And the devotees were very distressed, not knowing if they would ever see him again. So when he came back to San Francisco from India, it was a joyous return. They were so happy. And a convoy of devotees drove him to the apartment and threw flower petals at his lotus feet as he climbed the stairs. Swamiji sat on a floor cushion in the bare room, his danda nearby. Someone inquired, what was the cloth bag tied to the danda? Swamiji untied this bag, and there were 3 strands of crushed silk garlands, like those offered to Lord Jagannath in Puri. And he said, now these can be tied around the necks of Jagannath, Baladev, Subhadra, the deities they had there in San Francisco. The devotees didn't know anything. Everyone was so new. So then Prabhupada said, you can even make clothes for them. And they said, what kind of clothes would you make? Don't they already have clothes on? Isn't that what the painting is on the deities? And Prabhupada said, you will find that deities will sometimes be painted, or they'll be carving, but you can still make clothes for them. and put jewelry. And he had to train them with everything. So he explained the deities, so Jagannath, he can wear a turban, a shawl, and a little skirt. So Harsharani and Yamuna volunteered to sew for the deities. They didn't know prior about deity dressing. Then Swamiji, he still just arrived. He opened his suitcase and removed a stack of fine cotton Bengal saris and handed one to each of the female disciples. Can you imagine Prabhupada gifting you a sari? The affection and care in his face at that moment is a mental snapshot I will never forget, says Yamuna. My sari was a black cotton one with gold stripes and a red border. I cherished that sari and wore it for many years. Is there anything that struck you or that you found interesting that you would like to quickly share maybe? Okay. So we will continue. I found this relevant, at least for me. This is still in San Francisco. So Yamuna says, we had all become extremely attached to Srila Prabhupada. And when we learned that Gaur Sundar Das and Govinda Dasi had come to act as his personal servants, we were all sad and confused as to why devotees from outside were brought in to perform a service we all wanted to do so much. When Srila Prabhupada heard how we felt, he gave us our first in-depth instruction on the perils of envy in spiritual life. He said that envy exists at the highest levels in the material world, even demigods. And the very reason why we are in this material world is because of envy of Krishna. In the pure state of Krishna consciousness, everyone becomes happy at seeing others make more advancement or receiving special mercy from Krishna or the spiritual master. They are enthused and gladdened. And Yamuna wrote a note in her journal at that time. Envy is the heart. Envy in the heart is the weed that must be eliminated. It cannot be allowed to grow. Examine, examine, examine within. Where there is envy, I cannot appreciate the process or the goal. So, for me, I found that very relevant and something to remember. The journal. Envy in the heart is the weed that must be eliminated. It cannot be allowed to grow. Examine, examine, examine within. Where there is envy, I cannot appreciate the process or the goal, which means you cannot make progress. It blinds you. So, there was a couple, Gaur Sundar and Govinda Dasi. So, yes, they were other devotees, but they were, exactly, so they weren't from that temple. Yes. Why do we need others when we would love to do this and we're not able to? Yeah, envy for service, I guess, or envy of them for doing what they would have liked to do. Yeah. Envy is the root. We're in the material world because we're envious of Krishna. It could be. if you're happy that they're doing the service, you would like, and ultimately it's about what's pleasing Krishna or Prabhupada. If they can do the service better than you. Yeah, but there's so many layers. But yeah, surprising. Yeah. And individuals involved. So these two devotees, Gaurasundar and Govindadasi, Prabhupada asked them to help with teachings of Lord Chaitanya, which was being published. Govindadasi said she would type, but she didn't know how to type. So she didn't think she could help. So Prabhupada said, "You can learn to type." She replied, it wasn't her inclination. And then Prabhupada said, a devotee can learn to do anything if they repeat this prayer before they begin any service. Can anyone guess what this prayer is? So Prabhupada, Govindadasi said, I don't know how to type, so I can't help with teachings of Lord Chaitanya. And then Prabhupada said, you could learn. And she said, but it's not my inclination. And Prabhupada said, a devotee can learn to do anything if they chant this prayer before they begin the service. So, curious if anyone can guess what this prayer is. Yes, that's right. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Very powerful, yeah? So Yamuna said, ever since then, I've said this prayer before any service, no matter where I am. And very quickly, Govindadasi did learn to type for Srila Prabhupada. So, Yamuna reflected, this is Dinatarani, Yamuna reflected on her transition from tentative to committed devotee, how she got from one to the other. For her, the living example of Srila Prabhupada was core to that change. Her hearing from the scriptures about the qualities and character, and then seeing Srila Prabhupada being the living example of those qualities, cemented her dedication in the movement, her dedication and commitment. So, Srila Prabhupada then went to Los Angeles for 3 weeks. His health wasn't good. Janaki and Mukunda were there in Los Angeles. And once he called Janaki to dictate a letter. So she came in with her pad, a paper, and a pen. And Srila Prabhupada had her write a letter to Yamuna and said, Yamuna, you are a little better than Janaki. But don't get puffed up. And be good to those a little less fortunate. Very cheeky. And sweet. So soon after, Yamuna and her husband at the time, Gurudas, Shyamasundar and Lalitha, with their daughter, little baby, Saraswati, and Mukunda and Janaki were to open a temple in London, travel to London. And Srila Prabhupada had them stop in Montreal, where he was, for 9 days to train them and get them ready for preaching, for starting in London. And from my reading, it seemed it was all about kirtan. That was how he was going to conquer London. So at least the training was very focused on kirtan. He emphasized it was not a theatrical performance, it wasn't a performance, but an act of devotion. So you hired there. He had daily kirtan rehearsals with them, taught them to start with the slow tempo and build gradually. And he would correct Yamuna Devi's pronunciation, and she would often be leading. And he taught them a new melody for Guru Vastakam, and said now they had a morning melody and an evening melody, and he would have them sing those melodies at those times. After they went to London, and went through a lot of challenges. You can imagine, starting from scratch, pioneering. But then met with immense success, meeting the Beatles, who were huge at that time, and George Harrison, who was helping. So after a little time, they were temporarily staying in John Lennon's estate while they were getting the first new temple in London ready. And that's when Srila Prabhupada visited them in London while they were staying with John Lennon, or at his place. And there were many sweet and instructive pastimes that took place during this time in London. And Srila Prabhupada traveled with little 6-inch Radha Krishna deities. And with those deities, he taught Yamuna Devi deity worship during that time in London. And he said that chanting Hare Krishna was the essence of deity worship. And we should try to chant without offense. And that's important too. In whatever location or circumstance we found ourselves later on, he continued to train me. The essence of his instruction was 3: quality, cleanliness, and purity. One day, Srila Prabhupada asked Yamuna to paint a set of little Radha Krishna deities, which were going to be installed in Hamburg. She said she didn't feel she could do it. So he said he would show her what to do. And that evening, the deities were placed on Srila Prabhupada's small desk, and he personally painted them himself and instructed her at the same time. These are special deities. Then later, Srila Prabhupada sent Yamuna Devi with Tamal Krishna to install them. So she was assisting with the installation, she doing the Abhishek for these deities. So Yamuna describes about London, staying at Tittenhurst when Prabhupada was there. We had no furniture. We slept in sleeping bags on the floor. I had only 2 saris. We shared the rubber boots that were necessary for the wet weather of England. Srila Prabhupada's belongings were also very sparse. If devotees gave him things, he would often give them away. He traveled lightly. He didn't have multiple wardrobes in each location where he visited. The adjoining apartments had one front window. She was staying in an apartment next to Srila Prabhupada. The wall in my room, in the next apartment, adjoined Srila Prabhupada's. So I put my bed tightly against the wall to be as close to him as possible. His bed was just on the other side of the wall. Whenever I slept, I was completely aware of his schedule. She could hear. So they stayed at Tittenhurst with Prabhupada for just about 2 months. It's a long time with Srila Prabhupada. Yamuna says, Prabhupada had a fixed but slightly different schedule here than anywhere else. He had more time to rest. He didn't have many outside guests, and he could have at least 1 hour a day for solitary kirtan in his room. Every morning after the morning walk and breakfast, I would be downstairs when I would hear this most sublime singing and harmonium coming out of his window. He was on the 2nd floor, and the sound would come out, and the fog would burn off. It was like the sound burned away the fog. I would sit on the bottom of the stairs and cry. I never made a sound, never. But one day, Prabhupada said, Yamuna, come here. So I came up the stairs and I started to pay my obeisances when he said, "Do you like the chanting?" That really made the tears pour out. I replied, "Oh, Prabhupada," he said, "would you like to stay here?" Then I asked if we could record the bhajans, and he said yes. Several days we made recordings. Some of them you can still hear today. And Srila Prabhupada
was singing.
yeah,
She was listening.
down at the bottom of the stairs. He would know.
Robert came and asked her.
Called her for her to go up.
And that's how they take them.
Because she would, some of them, at least these,
That's what we're hearing now.
yeah, some of them, that's why there's recording. So Yamuna says, Srila Prabhupada had a personal relationship with every one of his disciples. His relationship with Janaki was special because she was his first female disciple, her sister. And she behaved like the youngest daughter in a family. She always spoke her mind to him, and he often called her his naughty daughter or his little mother. She loved to surprise him by giving him gifts she had found. And he knew how to draw out the best in each of us, to make each of us feel our service was necessary to him and the movement. So encouraging and personal. Once I became very ill with an extremely high fever, and I had to leave Srila Prabhupada's service. I was living in the apartment next to his and constantly praying to him, thinking about him, and meditating on his presence. The fever went on for 3 days. Finally, at the end of the 3rd day, I decided this morning, when Prabhupada came back from his morning walk, I would just hide behind the door at the bottom of the stairway and just glance at him as he walked past. So I wrapped a huge blanket around myself, still in my nightwear, but hiding behind the door. And Srila Prabhupada walked past. Just as he got to the door, he opened it and called out up the stairway, "Yamuna!" And here I was, standing just behind the door, watching him. Embarrassed, I fell to the ground, all wrapped up in my blanket. And I said, "Oh, Srila Prabhupada, I'm so very sorry for appearing in this way. But I had to catch a glimpse of you. I was thinking about you so very much." And he said, "I've also been thinking about you very much. How are you feeling?" I replied that I was feeling much better and that I should be back in his service in about 2 days or so. And he said, "Yes, the fever will last 3 days, and then 2 days to recover, 5 days and you will be back." He knew exactly the condition. And Srila Prabhupada always had an uncanny way of saying something, even something like a comment on my fever. And it became a prophecy. It happened. So, also something very special that happened during this specific time in Tittenhurst was morning walks there, because there were over 60 acres of gardens, so lots of space to walk. One day we were walking towards the camera. I was wearing my blue-black sari and boots. Srila Prabhupada was wearing his black coat, Russian hat, and black Wellington boots. There was long grass, and we walked down a little hill. Srila Prabhupada said, "I have been called many names in my life. without breaking stride. At birth, I was called Nandu because he was born on Nandosava, the day after Janmashtami, Nanda Maharaj's festival. Later, I got my formal given name, Abhay Charan. This one I find special. A nickname by my maternal aunt, mother's sister, was Little Lion. Because in her eyes, I was raucous and fearless, like a male lion cub. Another childhood name was Kachori Muki, for I had a habit of storing kachoris in my vest pockets. These were some of my many names, but those early names are all dead and gone. Then he resumed walking and chanting japa. On another walk, they walked some distance past the main house of John Lennon, and there was a wide gravel path, 200 yards long. And then Srila Prabhupada's boots, they were up to his mid-calf. They had only walked a small distance, 50 yards, and then Srila Prabhupada stopped and he turned around and he said, "There is some pebble in my boot. Take it out." So he leaned on my shoulder and I bent down and took off his boot and took out the 2 or 3 very small pebbles, which I put in my pocket, and then we walked on. Perhaps after another 50 yards, Srila Prabhupada again said, "There are more pebbles in my boot. Please take them out." He leaned on his cane and put his other hand on my shoulder, and I took them out. I looked at him in amazement. How could these pebbles get in his boot? Because they were high. And he looked down at me. "Why do they jump in here?" As though the pebbles were personalities. I said, "Of course, Srila Prabhupada. They can't resist the opportunity of being close to your lotus feet." He chuckled and said, "No, it is not so. I do not know how they are getting in here." On another walk, the long grasses were perfectly wet from the dew, and it was very foggy. So we were going down a hillock, and Prabhupada was walking a little ahead of me. As I was watching Srila Prabhupada's feet, I thought, I will step where he walks. The event of following the footsteps, so she will do that. All of a sudden, it hit me. There's no footprints. It was uncanny because I was the only person there at the time. And it struck me so profoundly. I turned around and looked, and there were really large, deep impressions where I had walked. But there was no footprints where Prabhupada was walking. So I stopped and said, "Prabhupada, I am confused. You were walking in front of me, but there are no footprints where you were walking. And where I walk, there are footprints. How is that?" So he was quite sober, and he said, "That will be revealed to you in time." But he never gave me an answer. The devotees arranged a series of programs at Conway Hall in London. They would go to London for programs with Srila Prabhupada. During one of these programs, Yamuna says, an extraordinary thing happened. Prabhupada led the first kirtan and then gave a lecture. I sat on the floor to his right with the harmonium, and after the lecture, I began leading the second kirtan. All of a sudden, Srila Prabhupada's voice cut through the auditorium, right in the middle of my chanting. I'd never heard him do that. And I hadn't heard the words he chanted. Narada Muni Bajai Vina, Radhika Ramana Name, he's saying. And then again he repeated it, completely out of the blue. I looked up and he looked down at me, signaling me to carry on. So I continued chanting Hare Krishna, and he continued singing his prayer to Narada Muni into his microphone. I closed my eyes and carried on, not knowing what was happening. We could all understand, though, that something inexplicable but amazing was happening. Everyone was jumping off the ground. We jumped off the stage, and all of us began running around the auditorium with the audience in Kirtan. The next morning, I asked Srila Prabhupada what happened that night. Didn't you see? Srila Prabhupada said. Narada Muni came to our Kirtan. No, I didn't see him, I answered. Yes, Narada Muni came, to Prabhupada's words. So I'll finish off.
What was the song that Prabhupada sang?
Narada Muni Bajai Vina Radhika Ramana Nam. So we must have seen him and then, yeah. So finally, the devotees moved to an almost finished new temple in London, which would have been a huge thing for Srila Prabhupada, being born in the British Kolkata and now bringing Krishna to London, the heart of the British Empire. They had one last thing, they needed Radha Krishna deities for the temple. So Yamuna says, I knew that Srila Prabhupada had gone in a van to the Hindu center, but I'd been disappointed in my aspirations for large marble Radha Krishna deities. So I didn't dare hope that they would come. So I was in Prabhupada's room, looking down, and the van pulled up outside. And as I watched, the back doors of the van opened, and Mukunda and Shyamasundar came out with their arms full. And Srila Prabhupada directed them to carefully bring the deities up the stairs to the room and set them down. My mouth was literally open in awe, and I felt faint. Then Srila Prabhupada looked at me with a joyous, mysterious smile and said, your marble Radha Krishna deities have come. Put them in the back corner and cover them with cloth. With tears of joy pouring down my face, I looked at these magnificent deities, all that I could have ever wished for, and was overwhelmed at their beauty. Prabhupada continued, Krishna has played a great trick on Mr. Goyal. As he spoke, his eyes were smiling, his mouth was smiling, his entire body was jubilant. This Krishna wanted to come here all along. Krishna has come in this form because of your prayers. But he waited until now to increase your desire for him. So the trick that Srila Prabhupada was referring to was Mr. Goyal had arranged for the deities to come, and in transport, Radharani's hand was broken. So they didn't feel it was proper to install them due to that. But Srila Prabhupada felt once repaired, she could be installed and fully present. So it wasn't an issue. The deities were given the names. Anyone? Yes, there you go. Shri Shri Radha London Ishwar. The Grand Supreme Lords, not Lord, the Grand Supreme Lords of London. Srila Prabhupada stayed a mere 6 days, only 6 days after the installation, and left. It was such a poignant moment for me. After everything we had been through in London, the challenges, the highs, the lows, and the ultimate thrill of now having this temple and those glorious deeds. Just before he left, Srila Prabhupada came into the temple and offered his obeisances to the deities. Full, flat dandavats. He seemed on the ground in that position for a long time. And when he got up, I noticed that he had tears in his eyes. And he looked over at me and said, "If you just do as I have instructed, what I have taught you so far, you will go back to Godhead. Do it. Just do it." And at that point, I folded my hands and simply watched Srila Prabhupada as he turned and walked out the front door. All I could say was, "Thank you, Srila Prabhupada. Thank you." So, next, she went to India. That was the next call in Seva, and we will hear about her Indian adventures tomorrow. Thank you very much. Thank you. Yamuna Devi ki jai. Is there anything that you found interesting in particular, or that struck you, or maybe that you found relevant, something that you can apply in your own spiritual life, or that you want to share? Feel free.
I read, it was like 20 years, I read this in Transcendental Diary.
Yeah.
Transcendental Diary by Hari. And I really wanted to see Yamuna Mataji. I really want to see her.
You want to see her? Yeah.
Because there was so much about her.
Yeah.
And I was in London on the 25th anniversary of Radha Lalitha in the manor. And I don't know how she looked because the road there was no WhatsApp. I don't know how she looked. And she was there. And I happened to be in London. It was so beautiful. It was Prabhupada's Guru Puja. So I love Prabhupada what he did. I'm so grateful. So I was in line. And I really wanted to see her. I really wanted to see her.
I really wanted to see Mother Yamuna, and we were all 25th anniversary Radha Landeshwara. All Krishna Maharaj, everyone was there. I think it was in 90, I can't remember which, it was 90 something. And I was standing in the queue to put flowers for Prabhupada, and Mother Yamuna came from behind. She came to me and she just tapped me. Come, come, come. And I said, who is this lady? And then I asked, who is she? This is Mother Yamuna. And I was like, I wanted to see her. And she came at the right moment, she just tapped me. And then she went up, so, I think she observed. She's so merciful, Mother Yamuna. I read about her.
Yeah.
I think
Before that.
Yeah, because I told you it's a transcendental diary.
Okay. Thank you.
She's so,
Very good.
so many stories that strikes me as the one where, she was painting
Hare Krishna, Mataji. Hare Krishna, thank you for your very lively sharing. Some things I haven't heard before. But I just want to add something. When I first became a devotee, one of my senior godbrother told me that if you want to become a very good cook or a good cook, he says you must get Yamuna Devi's book. And I would say that not just learning how to cook, in her book she has so many pastimes there with Prabhupada, and she sort of put it all in. So this is something I'm just sharing with you all, that that book is amazing. All the books are amazing. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. And then you remember her first meeting, and then coming to preparing that masterpiece.
She has that big cookbook.
Yeah.
Maybe she won a award.
Yeah.
I want that too. We must narrate the story, where she was painting Prabhupada's room. I think Prabhupada is visiting, and they have to prepare his room. Preparing the room that Prabhupada, painting Prabhupada's room. So she did it very well, and she wanted glorification from Prabhupada. And Prabhupada walked in the room and started, opening up the window. That was in the translated diary of Harisavi. And then Prabhupada said, open the window, and it was, something. Wait a minute. And then, these are commands that Prabhupada took away the pride. Yeah.
Again, the training teacher,
Prabhupada's training,
expert teacher, knowing who needs what and when.
Another one is a sari, She was sick in Calcutta, and she has no clothes. No, they have only 2 saris. And they have to wash, not one sari, they have to wash. And then she has to wait for the sari to dry. And then Prabhupada came to Calcutta, and then Prabhupada said, where's Yamuna? And they said,
This one is really, took my heart. Mother Yamuna had only one sari in Calcutta. So she dries the sari and then they stayed in the room with their, minimum clothing. And Prabhupada arrived in Calcutta. And Prabhupada said, where's Mother Yamuna? And then they kept quiet, and then they said, she's drying the sari. And Prabhupada kept silent. And then the next visit, Prabhupada bought her a sari in Calcutta. So this is, the dedication and just
The personal
very
love.
personal love. Yeah, I love Mother Yamuna.
Anyone else? Especially, I'm curious in terms of how we can learn from her learning, what we can apply, what's relevant in our own spiritual lives. Thank you. It's almost time. It is time. Over time. We'll finish now for the next session. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.